Hello, hello, hello. How are you? I sound like my grandma. My grandma used to shout from her back garden when we were coming across the fields. She'd go, "Cooey!" I recommend that you try that the next time you see somebody that you recognise in the street and you want to grab their attention. Cooey! It gets their attention right properly good. Anyway, that is beside the wayside, is that? We are still on Nutcracker and the Mouse King, but we're kind of not, because at the moment we are in the middle of a story within a story, because Godfather Drosselmeyer has been telling the children, Mary and Fred, one of his stories, which is the story of the hard nut. And so I started it, and then Sue continued. And what we're up to with the story of the hard nut is that Lady Mousekins, now, she's kind of threatened the Queen, and she says, all my cousins and all my family, well, the majority of them, they're all gone. So you just watch out, because I might bite your little princess in two. And Councillor Drosselmeyer, he's left it. He did what we do. He kind of left it in the middle. But now he is back. So let us continue with Nutcracker and the Mouse King. Chapter 8, The Story of the Hard Nut continued. Are you ready? Are you comfy? Let's get going. Now you see, children. So the councillor continued next evening. Why the Queen had the wonderfully beautiful little Princess Prillipat watched over with such care. She was not right to fear that Lady Mousekins would fulfil her threat by coming back to bite the... Was she not right to fear that Lady Mousekins would fulfil her threat by coming back to bite the royal baby in two? I should go. Drosselmeyer's machines were of no use at all against the cautious and crafty Mouse Queen, and only the court astronomer, who was also privy interpreter of omens and stars, could divine that the family of Pussy Purr had the power of keeping off mice from the cradle. So it came about that one of the sons of this family, attached to the court with the title of Chamber Councillors, was held on her lap by each nurse, that means a cat, whose duty it was to tickle him into contented performance of such laborious public service. It was the midnight hour, as one of the nurses in chief, who sat close to the cradle, started up from a deep sleep. All around lay buried in slumber. That means that everybody was asleep. And there was no murmur, a silence as of death, in which could be heard the faint click of a death-watch worm. But what were the feelings of the chief nurse when, right before her, she made out a great ugly mouse standing on its hind paws and laying its murderous head on the face of the princess? With a cry of horror, she sprang to her feet. Everyone awoke, but in an instant Lady Mousekins, the huge mouse on Prilipat's cradle, could be no other, scampered off to a corner of the room. The four-footed chamber councillors, the cats, rushed after her, but too late. She had vanished through a crack in the floor. Then, at the noise, Prillipat awoke, weeping piteously. "Thank heaven!" cried the nurses. "She is still alive!" But how great was their dismay, however, when they looked at Prillipatin and saw what had become of this sweet, tender child. Instead of the angelic white and rosy-curled hair, a thick, distorted head stood on a small, shrunken, crooked body. The sky-blue eyes had changed into green, goggling balls, staring straight before them, and the pretty little mouth gaped from ear to ear. Crikey! The Queen was ready to die for weeping and lamentation, and the King's study had to be hung with wadded tapestry, since again and again he ran his head against the wall, exclaiming in most lamentable tones, "Oh, unlucky monarch!" Oh. Probably something like that. Now, might he have seen that it were better to eat his sausages without bacon, and to leave Lady Mousekins and her kindred in peace beneath the hearthstone? But Prilipat's royal father had no such thought. Rather, he threw all the blame onto the court clockmaker and engineer Christian Elias Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg. Therefore, he sagely gave command as follows. Within 4 weeks, must Drosselmeyer restore the princess to her former state, so she looked like she did before, or at least suggest some trustworthy means of doing so, or tell him how they should do it. Or else he should suffer a shameful death under an executioner's axe. Crikey, so unless Drosselmeyer fixes it, he's going to be beheaded. Drosselmeyer was not a little alarmed, yet soon he took courage to trust his art and his good luck, and once set about the first operation, which seemed to him likely to be of use. He very skilfully took Prilipat to pieces, screwed off her hands and arms, and examined her construction inside. But thus he had the vexation of discovering, that means, I suppose, the vexation of discovering that the bigger the princess grew, the more unshapely she would become, and he could hit on no way of mending the matter. He carefully put the princess back together again and sank down in a gloomy dejection beside her cradle, which he did not leave day or night. The 4th week had come, and it was already Wednesday, when the king looked in with angry eyes and, shaking his sceptre at him, cried, "Christian Elias Drosselmeyer, set the princess to rights, or thou must die." Drosselmeyer began to weep bitterly, but the little Princess Prilipat went on contentedly cracking nuts. For the first time, the clockmaker was struck by Prilipat's unusual appetite for nuts, and by the circumstance that she had come with teeth into the world. That is quite strange. Indeed, after her transformation, she had gone on screaming just till she happened to have a nut given to her, which she at once cracked, ate the kernel, and then she became quite quiet. Since then, the nurses could never be done bringing nuts for her. Oh, sacred instinct of nature, eternal mysterious sympathy of all existence, exclaimed Christian Elias Drosselmeyer. Thou showest me the gate of the secret. I will knock, and it will open. He forthwith sought permission to consult the court astronomer, and was taken to him under a strong guard, because they probably thought he might run off. The two officers embraced each other with many tears, being devoted friends, and then they retired into a private cabinet to turn over many books which treated of instinct, of sympathy and antipathy, and other mysteries. So this is the court astronomer and Drosselmeyer, best mates. They probably shout cooey to each other. Cooey. Night coming on, the royal astronomer consulted the stars, and with the help of Drosselmeyer, also well versed in the same art, drew out Princess Prilipat's horoscope. Now, this proved a hard task, for the lines of fate became more and more entangled as they went on, but at last, oh, joy, it lay clear before them that to destroy the enchantment which had so hideously deformed her, and to be made as beautiful as ever, Princess Prilipat had nothing to do but to eat the sweet kernel of the nut Crackatuck. The nut Crackatuck had such a hard shell that a 48-pound cannon could be driven over it without breaking it. Now that's pretty strong. This hard nut must be cracked by the teeth of a man who had never shaved and never worn boots, and he must hand it to the princess with his eyes shut and not open them till he'd taken 7 steps backwards without stumbling. 3 days and 3 nights did Drosselmeyer and the astronomer work unceasingly, and it was only on Saturday, at the king's dinner time, that Drosselmeyer, who was to be beheaded on Sunday, burst in, full of triumphant joy, to announce the discovery of the means for restoring the princess's lost beauty. The king, embracing him with warm affection, promised him a sword set in diamonds, 4 orders of chivalry, and 2 new Sunday coats. "Immediately after dinner, set about the business," he bade. "See to it, dear engineer, that the young unshaved man in shoes is provided, along with the nut Crackatuck, and let him drink no wine beforehand for fear of his stumbling when he takes 7 steps backwards, like a crab. After that, he can soak himself to his heart's content." Drosselmeyer was sadly taken aback by the king's speech, and, not without consternation and trembling, that means he was quite nervous, he stammered forth that the means of cure indeed were discovered, but that the nut and the young man to bite it were still to find. Indeed, there was some doubt whether a nut and Nutcracker would ever be found. "Then you must be beheaded after all," roared the king, in a lion voice, wrathfully brandishing the sceptre above his crowned head. Luckily, it was for the poor Drosselmeyer that the king had enjoyed his dinner that day, so as to be in good humour for listening to the arguments which the magnanimous, that means kind of kind, the magnanimous queen did not fail to bring forward in favour of one whose sad fate had touched her heart. Drosselmeyer plucked up courage and represented on his own part, that means he spoke for himself, that he had duly fulfilled the task set to him, and had earned his pardon by pointing out how the princess could be cured. The king said that this was all stuff and nonsense, but finally decided, after he had taken a glass of stomach cordial, that both the clockmaker and the astronomer should set forth not to return without the nut Crackatuck in their pockets. The man to bite it open, as the Queen suggested, must be sought for through repeated insertions of an advert in the home and foreign newspapers. Here, Councillor Drosselmeyer again broke off, promising to relate the rest the next evening. So, just as I'm going to do, I need to break off now. Councillor Godfather Drosselmeyer, the one with Mary and Fred, he stopped and went home for the night. Now I'm in my own house, so I'm going to stay here. But you, my dear friends, you must return when Sue continues with the final part of that bit. Enjoy. Have a lovely sleep if that is what you're going to do. And don't forget, the next time you see somebody that you know across the street, it might be an auntie, it might be an uncle, it might be a friend from school, you have to go, "Cooey!" It works a treat.